I'm Amanda Silver.
And I'm Alex Howard.
And this is Dirty Laundry. So, it's been an interesting week.
Okay, so let's just tell the people. Amanda's pissed at me with very valid reason.
I'm a little pissed.
I fucked up major big time.
It was a major
fuck up. And I say it's major because maybe people will listen. They'd be like, it's no big deal.
No.
But the reason it's especially major is because if the tables were turned, I may never speak to you again.
Seriously?
No, I mean, no. I love you way too much.
Would you have been so mad if I did that?
I would not go.
Okay,
so let's talk about this. Because you know what? Our listeners have been here since we did this a year ago.
Wait, no, we started recording.
No, I know, but I'm saying, so here's the spoiler is we have another industry conference. I don't know what you would call it. So our governing body, if you will, puts on an annual conference. And for those that have listened previously, we had tons of anecdotes. We went to Niagara. We had such a great time.
Last year.
We made all kinds of new friends. I was very bold and spoke to people.
Yes.
It was a hilariously good time.
And we couldn't wait to do it again this year.
We couldn't wait. So much so that one of us forgot to register entirely.
And we had talked, okay, to be fair, we talked about this conference a few times this year.
Yeah, they had like early bird discounts.
Yeah,
we were both like, we'll deal with it.
We'll figure out, we'll sign up right, before whatever.
Who cares about early bird discounts?
So the conference is tomorrow. Okay. And then a couple of days ago, I see something pop up on my phone about the conference. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot to register, or I thought I did. I didn't register. And I'm like, I felt terrible because I'm like, Alex and I have been talking about this conference. We went last year, had a great time. We're going to go again this year together with like so much more to share. Our podcast has been going and booming and all the things.
Yeah.
I'm like, I got to make this right. So I emailed the director, please, is there room for just one more? Like, I won't even eat. Like, just let me come. Like, I was talking to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I can't do this to Alex. I can't abandon her and have her go to this conference by herself. He's like, you better make it right, Amanda. You better make it right. So anyways, the director, the loveliest woman. And she's like, it's okay. We'll make an exception. We'll squeeze you in. I paid my registration fee. And the next day I'm on the call with Alex. Yeah. And I'm like, Alex, I really almost,
you were ready to confess.
I was in a confessional.
Screw up.
I was in a confessional.
You really were.
Like,
tail between your legs.
What is it called when you confess? What did they say in the Father? What did they say in the confessional?
Say 3 Hail Marys and you're good to go.
All the things. I was
forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
That's what. Forgive me, Alex, for I have sinned. And so I'm like, I didn't register for the conference, but don't worry. I got in, and she goes, what conference? I'm like, what do you mean what conference? She goes, oh yeah, no, I didn't register. I'm like, what do you mean?
I know. I don't even have anything to say.
I'm doing a race on Saturday. I'm like,
yeah, sign up for a race. I know.
So I'm going by myself.
So I needed to show up to this conference solo and fucking talk to people.
You would have been.
I'd have been so pissed at you.
And my dad, who knows you so well, was like,
him.
She can't go by herself. She
won't survive.
She actually cannot. She can't go by. You can't do this, Dad.
I'm the worst.
So
human.
My dad and I were having this conversation. I'm like, don't worry, Dad. I'm not going to abandon her. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to make things right. And abandoning him.
Fucked up bad.
So now I'm going solo to the conference.
Mm-hmm. Sheldon's never going to speak to me again either. Shout out to Papa Silver.
So now you are forever in my... No, I'm forever... No, you're forever in my debt.
Forever.
I'll
never live this down.
You'll never live this down.
And you know what? I'm such a self-punisher that you don't even need to say anything.
Just like...
I put myself through the ringer.
Conference.
I couldn't sleep last night.
No.
I was sitting on the porch with Jonathan. We were having a glass of wine. I'm like, well, the wine, hopefully it helps sleep because I really fucked
And
up.
I did go and tell Jonathan.
I know you did.
I had to.
That's how I knew you were really mad. And he's like, oh yeah, she's pissed. She DM'd me. I'm like, no,
I did. I'm like, have you seen? Has Alex spoken to you about anything? Has she mentioned anything? Oh no. I'm like, oh no. Well, let me tell you, Jonathan. Let me tell you what she's been up to.
She's been fucking around.
Yeah.
Not in the cliche way.
No, she's been fucking around.
But you know what this leads me right into, because I love a good segue.
He loves a good segue.
It tells me that we have to work on our communication. And you know who's an expert communicator?
Jessica Frew.
Jessica.
She is so great. I am
She's a
just
badass.
she's such a badass.
Yeah.
She's got
Yeah.
such an amazing story.
Yeah.
She's really living proof that you can go through the shit. You can go through the betrayal, you can go through the divorce, you can go through the co-parenting and come out as a family, like as a united front. You don't have to be married to be a family and to just get along and to make it work and to like live happily.
Live happily and truthfully.
Yes.
Like she really encompasses her truth in everything she does.
Yeah.
And it is inspiring. Like it really is an inspiration.
It really is. So welcome, Jessica.
I mean, I have a bazillion questions.
A bazillion.
In one, in fact. But let's go back because you have such a unique story. And part of what we want to do with our platform here is just share all different kinds of stories so that folks feel like they're not alone. Like there's other people, living their own lives in their own way. And it doesn't always have to be so status quo and what you see online and blah, blah, blah. Can you, Jess, take us way back? Your first marriage. You're dating Steve. It's going well. You decide to get married. Go. What does that look like for you? Go way back for us.
So Steve and I, in February, when we were in college, and we met at a choir concert. I had to be there because I was a vocal performance major, and I was going to leave because I was like, I don't want to be here. This is the worst. I'm not feeling this. So I was about to stand up and leave, and this group of women walk in, and they block the aisle, and they all file in the row in front of me. And at the end, there's this tall, blonde, good-looking guy, and there's no room for him to sit next to him, so he had to sit next to me. And by the end of the night, he had my phone number. He called and asked me out the next day, and we started dating. Like we were together every day that we could be.
I love that.
And we, like I said, we met in February. We were married by December. So
wow.
we got married pretty quick.
Yeah.
Not as quick as me and my second husband, though.
Ooh, well, don't go. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
A whole
Yeah.
other story. And we had like a really great first year of marriage. Like you hear about how it's really hard and it's just all these things come up. And Steve and I, it just felt natural. Like it just felt like a good fit.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed each other together. And as we continued forward, I happened one day to find a bunch of pornography on our computer. And I was looking at this pornography and I'm like, there are no women here. No women anywhere.
Interesting.
And I was just like, okay, I'm sure some straight men are into this,
Right.
but I'm pretty sure my husband's gay.
Right.
And at that point, Steve couldn't even admit that to himself. He's like,
wow.
no, I'm not gay.
Right.
He didn't want to disrespect women. We were raised in a very conservative Christian religion, and he just felt like, I should just not be looking at women. This is him in complete denial of the fact that he is gay.
Yeah. Had there been any kind of other signs prior to the gay porn, or was that really like, and then if not, did it all sort of click as soon as you saw that and you were like, oh, this makes sense now?
It's interesting because there wasn't. Like, I think that's purely because Steve felt really safe being himself with me, even before. I mean, he obviously wasn't comfortable with owning who he was and being secure within himself. But as much as he could own that, I don't think there had been anybody in his life that he felt he could be as open with as who he was. And therefore, we had a really strong emotional connection, which then led to a pretty good sexual connection. And so like, that's what people are like, well, were you having sex?
Right.
Like, what is this? You had a kid later. So obviously you were. So things were there and we just had fun. Like I never before that moment thought my husband's gay or Steve might be gay. There was nothing in our relationship that kind of led me to that conclusion. And it wasn't like oh, this makes sense now. It was kind of like oh crap, what the heck do I do with this information?
Yeah. That must have been quite
we're happy.
Yeah.
It must have been quite a shock for you. Like you said, like you didn't, I mean, I would think that maybe some other people maybe would have some signs.
Yeah, you would think.
You think,
Yeah.
and and you're saying there weren't. So that must have been quite a shock for you.
It was pretty shocking. It was also like, I think a lot of times when people get divorced, especially because of betrayal or infidelity or having a partner come out, there's like it's usually pretty abrupt, and a lot of
Mm.
things you have to mourn and grieve all in that moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like mine and Steve's relationship, it was like these moments of mourning for 7 years of like
Mm.
releasing what I thought our relationship would look like to
Mm.
embrace the one that was the reality at that moment.
Right.
And so it kind of was like this lead up of maybe tiny shocks
Right.
Yeah.
along the way of like, oh, okay, now this is something I have to deal with and
Yeah.
address. And am I comfortable staying, or do I need to
Mm.
leave now? Like, what is the timing for us to end this relationship? Um, so I mean, yeah, it was shocking, but it was like these moments along the way. It was just
Yeah.
like a weird experience.
And I'm so curious, like I've always wondered from the inside, what does that conversation look like? You know, you said you both decided to stay and then you afterwards you had a baby. So like what does that conversation look like between the two of you?
I mean, until the affair, we
Yeah.
both really planned to stay in the marriage. And there were just conversations about like, okay, how do we make this work? How do we allow space for Steve to accept who he is and embrace that? Neither one of us were willing to open up our marriage. And so we had to
Mhm.
kind of figure out like things to do with that. I mean, we had conversations towards the end. It was like talking about who Steve thought was attractive. Like he would point out guys that he thought was into and stuff, which was, kind of fun in ways. But it was fun because I was getting to know Steve on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, this is really who you are. And it's so great to feel connected to you this way. And also, this thing that I'm connecting with you on could mean the end of our marriage.
Right.
And so we'd have conversations about those things, but we never actually really talked about divorce until the affair. So there was never like that conversation. It
Yeah.
was more, what are our boundaries within this?
Right.
What do we do? How do we help each other feel seen and supported within this reality? How do we love ourselves along the way and love each other? So
Yeah.
it was a lot of those type of conversations.
So the affair happens, and
Mhm.
was that for you the deal breaker? Like, was this ultimately your decision, or was it more he realizing, and I don't want you to speak obviously on his behalf, but kind of realizing, oh, this is the life that I want. I need to move on. Or was it mutual?
I was gonna say it's kind of like all of those things wrapped into one. Steve, when he did tell me about the affair and we had this whole conversation, he told me, he's like, I thought that I would do this thing and it would feel disgusting and wrong and
Mm.
horrible because that's what he'd always been taught. Like, this is wrong, this is gross, this is not okay. And he's like, instead, it felt like one of the most right things I have ever done in my life. And he's like, except for the fact that I know it's going to hurt you and that I just broke like our marital, vows and all that
Right.
stuff. He's like, outside of that, it just felt so right. And at that point, Steve was like, I don't want to leave you still. Like, I can't imagine giving this up. And also, I know what this is now. And I don't know if I can let go of that. So we tried to work it out for a couple months. And then, like, I left for a couple of weeks to kind of give us some space. But there's not a lot you can do without telling people what's going on,
Right.
because, of course, people are gonna be like, "What's happening? Like, why did Jessica just leave?" And, like, I don't know. So and Steve wasn't sure if he was even ready to do that, of, like, own this.
Right.
Um, but he was no longer attracted to me. So that
Yeah.
was kind of the point that really I realized I couldn't handle, and I carried some guilt about that for a while of like, why is this so important to me that my partner is attracted to me? But hello, that's what
Yeah.
romantic
Yes.
relationships
Yeah,
are about.
I think
Like,
that's
that's
fair.
marriage. That's
Yeah.
a big,
Right.
important part of marriage.
Yeah.
And so it took some time for me to like release that guilt for
Yeah.
myself. But in that, him not being attracted to me and him knowing that this felt right, I'm like, we have to figure out a way to release this and to
Yeah.
find a new reality for our family.
And how hard for you, because your experience and wanting to, let's say, confide in people or talk to, family or friends about what you're going through, also then outs him, which maybe he's
Yeah.
not ready to do. Like,
Right.
that's his lived experience. They're so intertwined. But how do you then maintain his confidence while still seeking the help and support you need? Like, what a pickle.
And to say we're separating, but maybe not.
But I can't tell you why.
Like,
Yeah.
so Yeah, how did that conversation go? Was that like we're gonna tell people at the same time, like we're separating and
Yeah.
he's gay, or we're gonna do it in steps? Like, how did that work?
So there was like a few people in our lives that knew. So Steve's mom knew. She was the only one in any of our family that knew that he was gay. Um, and a couple like of our friends knew, like literally two of our friends. So when this was done, that's not true. Some friends knew about the affair and everything that I went to stay with. So I went to stay with friends for those 2 weeks. I was like, here what's going on. We need some space to figure some things out. And they're like, come on over. So they knew. But I told Steve, I'm like, listen, we just need to basically rip this Band-Aid off and be honest about this. Like, you've spent so many years hiding. Let's just be honest and go forward. And he was so scared.
Sure.
But he also really trusted me. And he's like, okay. He's like, I know I have your support, which you're the one person that, whose support I don't really deserve right now. And I have your love. And so I'm going to trust this. And so like I called my parents. I'm like, hey,
How's it going?
Steve's gay. He had an affair. I'm packing up my stuff from Oklahoma this weekend. I'll be home in like 3 days. We owned a house in the same city my parents lived. And I'm like, so we might crash at your place for like a night or two until I get some furniture. And then Penny and I, our daughter and I, are moving into our house there.
Wow.
I don't remember much of what they said. I just remember like silence.
That's a lot.
That's a lot to lay on the parents. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I came home from visiting our friends and packed up and moved home. And so I told my family, I started telling friends, like, it was just kind of it was just kind of like an agreement that whoever we talked to and felt we needed to tell or wanted to tell, it was an open book.
Okay.
Steve had told his family at this point, and those were the people we felt, we owed the most.
Yeah.
We didn't owe anybody anything, but
I
that we
love that.
wanted to know the most.
You don't owe anyone anything. Yeah.
You don't owe anybody anything.
No, your story is your story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you decide, okay, we're going to get divorced and we want to dictate the terms and we want the outcome to look like X, which is amazing. It's like a work back plan.
Because usually it's the process that dictates how things work, right? The outcome, rather you took control of it.
I love it.
And came at it from a place of like obviously love and respect and care for each other and for your daughter. So what was that like? What was that conversation like?
We really kind of like when we had conversations about what we wanted the future to look like, we really tried to do it when we were in high emotional states, because of course we were like ebb and flowing all over the place with one of us is up, one of us is down, like whatever, as you're navigating divorce. And we just kind of like picked times that we knew we were both kind of level and planned it out, like literally what we hoped our future partners would look like and how we hoped our family structure could be. And really what we wanted for Penny, she was 2 at the time. And we were like, I told Steve, I'm like, I don't want to be those parents that I drop her off at school and you have to pick her up because we can't be in the same room, or that she, like whatever Penny's big life events, whatever she's excited about in her life and she wants her family there, that there is any worry about us being together in the same room. And I know not everybody can have this, and I get that, but I was like, this is my vision. And Steve was like, I'm on board. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who had the affair and all of that. Like, I'm just so grateful. And so we had this ability to communicate. Now, this is the initial conversation. You have to we're 12 years out post-divorce.
Okay.
And it's an ongoing work. Penny's now 14. It requires a lot of intention and communication and having some hard conversations.
I mean, raising a 14-year-old,
hard enough.
It's hard enough, but doing it divorced.
Yeah. So what is your co-parenting schedule, life? How does that look for you on like a day-to-day, just logistical, boring basis?
I mean, it's ebbed and flowed and shifted over the years, depending on what Penny has needed, which is one of the benefits of having a very open, co-parenting relationship. I honestly have like 100% of everything in the actual papers. We were just like, keep it simple. We'll figure this
Right.
out. That was a
Right.
lot of trust on
A
Steve's part.
lot.
Yeah.
Was
A
that
lot of trust.
Jessica, was that trust or was that guilt?
I'm sure it was a combination
Yeah.
of both
Yeah.
at the moment for Steve, of feeling like I'm the one that ruined this.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
and as we're going through this, like I'm walking Steve through like, you need to release this guilt. Like this
Yeah.
is the shame of this. Like this is how our story was. I stayed knowing this was a possibility.
Right.
I
Right.
read all sorts of books about mixed orientation marriages. I
Yeah.
knew our marriage might end this way. And so like trying to navigate that. But yes, he signed that off. Today with a 14-year-old,
Yes.
Penny's like, listen, it's just too much going back and forth. She was going back. It was almost every other week.
Right.
But like with sports and like all of the
Yeah.
things
Her
and
social life. She
school
has, yeah.
stuff and
Yeah.
social life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she is at my house most of the time. That being said, it's always kind of like an open book of Steve being like, hey, I have a free night. Can I pick Penny up to go do this? I'm like, yeah, talk to her.
Right.
Let me know. But it's very much kind of dictated by Penny at this point. I was
Mhm.
never comfortable with that when she was little. Like I didn't
Right.
want her to feel the pressure of having to
Right.
choose or pick a parent. But now she knows she has a voice and she gets a say. So she's at my house during the weeks. She's at Steve's house every other weekend. And then like Tuesday nights are set that he picks her up from school, but then brings her home to my house at night. And sometimes like if it's been like he hasn't seen her much, then we'll do that a couple nights a week. But that's kind of our setup right now. And it's been working really
I
Yeah.
think
well.
that is
Love
so,
that.
I mean, to me, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
To have an sort of more open, flexible parenting plan where
Mhm.
like you follow the kids' needs, not set
Yeah.
in stone. Okay, so we
Yeah.
wrote this on paper, but we're just going to follow what they need and it's going to change. And to be able to have that flexibility, I mean, that is just, that's wonderful. Like,
Yeah.
kudos to
And
you for doing that.
I always say, like, in the beginning, I think it is really important to have something pretty set. Like,
Yeah.
not that you can't be semi-flexible, but providing space to create that trust and rebuild a
Mm,
relationship with your ex
Mm.
because stuff has happened and you need to rebuild that trust of and respect of other people's times, trusting yourself again. Like,
Mhm.
that's the main thing I would say. You don't have to trust your ex, you have to trust yourself.
Yes.
But just establishing that and your kids kind of need to know what's happening just so that they have some stability in all this craziness, but I do feel like if you can get to the point where there's some flexibility, that's amazing.
yeah.
We have a very different relationship with my husband's ex-wife,
Mm.
and for years, it had to be very cut and dry, very set to the schedule. Everything needed to be really it just needed to be the schedule had to be followed,
Yeah.
for the sake of our kids,
Right.
for their peace, for their well-being, and so I know that, like, it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Now
Right.
that we're in teen years and they can drive, it's very much it's more fluid. I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And just so our listeners know, you're remarried to Matt, and he has
Mhm.
2 kids, right? And so there's
Yes.
3 kids between the 3 of you.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
I have a 14-year-old. His daughter turned 16 today,
Wow.
and then he has a 17-year-old son. So we've got
Very cool.
And I
3
say
kids
this,
within 3 years of each
yeah.
other.
Wow.
I say the 3 of you because the 3 of you, for our listeners who don't know, the 3 of you host your podcast called the Husband-in-Law
Yes.
Podcast, which is adorable, and I've heard it, and I think
Cute.
it's the cutest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how you said you talk about trusting yourself again, which I love because
Mhm.
often that's the hardest sort of hump to get over where we stop trusting our judgment when we are betrayed by somebody. How could we not see the signs? How did we not know? Yada yada. So how do you find that trust again? And then how do you sort of open yourself up to a new partnership after that
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's great that you guys can co-parent and you're still friends, but you still
Mhm.
feel that deep down. That's still
Oh, yeah.
your husband didn't choose you. Like that's really hard to get over. How do you do that?
So, in the women that I work with and in my everyday life,
Yeah.
I am like, the way to build trust in yourself is to go back to the littlest things because starting at a young age, we have been taught not to trust ourselves. Our parents, in, trying to do their best, have told us, oh, that doesn't hurt. You're fine. That's whatever. So we instantly are like, oh, I can't trust what I'm feeling in myself. I can't. this can't be right. And then as we get older, we hit teen years. And of course, we're like, oh, I should look like that. I should want this. I should feel this. I should whatever. And we should all over ourselves. And that then breaks down the trust we feel in ourselves as well. And we doubt the things we feel. Well, I must not be right if I really like doing this thing, but everybody else my age is like this way. And so we start just shutting that down over the years. And then often when we're in a relationship where there is betrayal, there's an ongoing message of, no, everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. This is your issue. There's something
Right.
wrong with you, when a lot of times there's betrayal going on. So we have been shut down. Like our trust is shot. And then when we find it out, it's like, I knew it. Like I knew something was going on. And also our trust, we still don't trust ourselves because it's been so long that our body and mind have felt safe trusting ourselves. So I always tell women, I'm like, we are starting with a trust your gut challenge. And it goes back to the very basic things of you get up in the morning and you're like, what do I want to put on my body? Like, what do I want to wear for me outside of anything else? What do I want to eat today? And this specifically, I usually focus on lunch as a mom. Like, my kids are at school,
Yeah.
my husband's gone. What do I want to eat for lunch? Like, what actually sounds good? And those types of little things, and we have to learn to hear ourselves again. And then the key is that you actually act on it. And you don't should on yourself of like,
Right.
oh, but I shouldn't want that. Or, oh, I shouldn't wear that today because XYZ. Like, no, like
Yeah.
just trust your intuition and act on those little things. And then as you start doing that, you start hearing yourself in louder and bigger ways because you are telling yourself, listen, I want to hear you. I am trusting that it's safe to listen to you and act on those things, and I'm gonna do it. I'm going to act on those things. And then as bigger things happen, we can hear it saying like, "Hey, this isn't a good situation for you to be in.
Right.
Hey, you don't need to know this information about what happened between your ex and whoever he
Mhm.
was with or is currently with." Like these things start coming up and we're like, "Oh, I hear this now. What am I going to do about it?" Because we can't
Right.
change anybody else's behavior. We can only deal with ours and what we're thinking about it. And so we have to start rebuilding that in very small ways. And I always say, like, now I don't have to trust Matt. I don't have to
Right.
trust him. I do, but that's mostly because I trust myself. There were lots of things that happened when like Steve was on work trips that were not okay. I mean, he
Right.
never had a blatant affair, but things happened.
Right.
And so now when Matt travels, people are always like, how can you trust him? Like, how are you okay with that? I'm like, it never crossed my mind that
Interesting.
Matt might be
Interesting.
doing something because I trust how I'm feeling right now.
Huh.
Like, I'm not spiraling, I'm not questioning. And so I know that can be fine. Now, that's not to say that there might be some triggers that come up or
Right.
some
Okay.
trauma
Yeah.
that resurfaces in this process. But you can come back to like, okay, I know who I am. I'm safe right now. Also, I know my partner. And be honest with your partner. Like, listen, this is really hard for me because of this.
Right.
Right.
And these are the thoughts I'm having. Can you communicate with me? And if you have a partner that you can trust, they are going to communicate with you in ways that work for you or like reassure you in real ways. And that's when you will feel that, like, okay,
Mm.
this is okay. Or you won't.
Right.
And you'll be like, something still just like really doesn't feel right. Even though I know he's trying to like support me in this, like something still feels off. You get to trust that. You don't need proof.
Right.
We as women
Yeah.
wait for proof. And I'm like, stop waiting for the
Yes.
proof. If you know something's wrong, it's like act on it.
Yeah.
Right. They look the
So,
other way until it's actually black and white in front of them.
Instead
yes,
of
Yeah.
trusting their
yes.
Instead
gut.
of just their gut. Yeah.
Yeah, it's those little things, those little moments that we really have to work on. And then we can hear ourselves, we can act on those things. We have more courage to act on those things and to be like, no, I get to trust myself.
Yeah.
I get to know that this is good.
Yeah.
And when you can communicate those things to your partner, makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
But again, like you have to be honest with your partner about that. Like sometimes we've been shot down so many times by our ex, like, no, it's nothing, whatever, you're too emotional, you're too whatever. You were too emotional because you knew that
Yeah.
something big was happening and that something wasn't okay. It wasn't your fault. So now we have to repair that messaging that
Mm.
we've received in ourselves. Um, but it can be done. And
Yeah.
it's great on the other side.
And how long have you and Matt
Yeah.
been married then?
We've been married for almost 11 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
So fairly quickly
Yeah.
after the divorce, you met him and then got married very
Yes.
quickly as well.
Yeah. I always say, like, because I had those moments of kind of mourning what my relationship
Right.
with Steve was going to look like, I had mourned a lot of the big stuff along the way. And it was kind of like just the stamp on the head when
Right.
it was like, we are done,
Yeah.
we're moving forward. And I very much knew what I wanted.
I think that's true for a lot of people and from the outside, you see, oh, they're separated and then you see he's got a new girlfriend or she has a new boyfriend or what have you. And people don't understand who are on the outside, how they can move on so fast.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to people is they've done a lot of the grieving. They've done a lot of the mourning while they're still quote unquote married and together. And then often it's when they're at the end of that, they actually make the decision to separate. So you're not seeing the
100%.
full progress of that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why we always
Yeah.
go back to saying, you
Like-
have no idea what's happening in someone's relationship.
You have no
butt
idea.
out.
Yeah,
None of
exactly.
this.
Don't give your opinion on
Keep
other
your
people's.
opinions out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious about an issue. We deal with a lot of like clients who do deal with infidelity. It's a big one, right? It's a big trigger for separation. It's a big one. A lot of it is heterosexual clients. So I'm wondering how it differs. Like, what do you think? Is it hard?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm sure you've been.
I
I'm
get
sure
this
you've given this-
question all
Yeah,
the time.
I bet.
Or people who come at me and they're like, well, it was easier for you because he was gay.
Right.
So, whatever you're teaching or helping me with won't work. And I'm like, okay, you can continue to think that way.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Infidelity and betrayal are still infidelity and betrayal. And it's still trauma no matter how it's sliced.
Yeah.
Now, mine and Steve's relationship, I was blessed with a partner who communicated with me. So there is that. Like, I know that is different for a lot of people. And probably made it easier for me to, I don't know if it made it easier or if I've just been really good at trusting myself. I was going to say easier to trust people along the way. I knew the second I saw Steve, he had an affair. And there was no convincing me that didn't happen or that something big didn't happen. I knew something was wrong. And Steve denied it for like just a week.
Oh,
but
wow.
Steve knows that I know my gut and I am not going to, something was wrong and I wasn't okay. And you could say I was too emotional, whatever. I don't care. Like when something like that happens, you're freaking emotional.
Yeah.
I was up after Steve would go to bed crying until like 2 a.m. Like, what is happening? And that wasn't my normal.
Yeah.
It was my body like screaming at me like, this isn't okay.
It's a trauma for you that your body is always
major
going through a
100%.
trauma. Yeah. And having to process that.
Like, yes, there are differences, but I don't think there's any way to compare anybody else's trauma or betrayal or stories because we're so unique in how we feel and process through things that, somebody might go through something and I'm like, oh, that's no big deal. But for them, it's huge and it is like overwhelming and that's real and that's beautiful. And I think that as we recognize how real things are in ourselves and how we need to do what feels right for us, we have an opportunity to be more supportive of other people and understanding as they go through hard things of just being like, yeah, that really sucks. Like this is hard.
Yeah.
And I'm here for you in whatever direction you take this. And when that changes, ebbs and flows, like I'm here to support you. So I don't think that it's less traumatic, especially if you talk to some of the women I work with that have been through this. I'm like, this is deep trauma.
Yeah.
And for many of them, and just as I'm sure in I work with women who have been in heteronormative relationships and had betrayal happen.
Yeah.
So I've seen both sides. But I was going to say there's a lot of sexual trauma when a partner comes out because usually the woman in the bedroom is being told, well, you're just not good enough, or this isn't right. Or it's often put on the woman because the husband just doesn't know how to deal with it, or they've been in denial and they still can't accept it. So they think that it must be her fault and they put that on her. So there's like all of this trauma, dealing with our sexuality that you have to process through. But again, that happens in lots of forms of betrayal because they're sleeping with somebody else.
Right. I
Like,
think it
it just
happens
doesn't
in
matter.
heteronormative
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
in the same way where the woman is, let's say we're talking about the woman being rejected. It's that rejection in the bedroom. And I'm sure it happens both with men too.
For
Both ways.
sure.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
My husband and I, he went through a lot of betrayal in his first marriage. They were married a very short time, and there was a lot of betrayal that went on there.
Yeah.
And him being married to me was triggering for him because I actually wanted to have sex with him. And like literally he was convinced for the first year we were married that I was a sex addict. Because I actually wanted to have sex. And his friends had told him, oh, it's normal for your wife not to want to have sex with you. And I'm like, your friends are dumb.
Yes.
Like, if you are treating your wife with any amount of respect and love, like
she's going to want to. Yes.
There's all sorts of situations. But, like, they were all young and in their 20s. And I'm like, something's not connecting for them, babe.
Yeah.
Like, this is a belief you were carrying. And also your wife was sleeping with a lot of other people. No, wanting to have sex with you is normal because I really like you. And so like that was his trauma coming into this of like, you actually want to sleep with me? Like, okay. And I'm like, why don't you want this? And anyway, we just worked through a lot of stuff.
And that's the difference between, I think, a sign of a healthy relationship versus not healthy, right? So I think a lot of people who we talk about sexless marriages all the time, and they might be in sexless marriages for different reasons, right? There's a whole bunch of different reasons. But that's a sign of a not so healthy relationship.
Well, or just that something is going on.
Something's going on.
But I laugh because while you're talking, it's shocking to me that any relationships do work because we all have so much baggage and so many preconceived notions. And we've told ourselves all these, insane stories and we don't actually talk to each other to get those stories out the window and to get real facts. And I think, you clearly have an ability to communicate in both relationships. It's really showing up.
Yeah.
And it seems like that has resulted in healthy relationships generally, whether it's, your ex and co-parenting or your current husband. I mean, that ability to communicate, to trust yourself and to say, hey, I feel something and I'm going to bring it to you. And this is a safe space and we can work through this. And to have that trust reciprocated and, that vulnerability and that openness, that to me really seems like the thesis of this whole interview, which is if people can communicate in their relationships more and stop making such assumptions, because the baggage is always going to be there. We're always going to have some form of trauma, big T, little t, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
We all have shit going on. How can we communicate to our partners in a way that's like, hey, this is my stuff and I trust you, so I'm going to bring it to you. And I want you to bring me your stuff. And it's not going to scare me away or it's not going to make me unattracted to you or whatever people are so fearful of. If we could actually just show up, warts and all, and accept our partners with theirs and just be like, yeah, it's all good. And I still want a bone. And I still, we're going to fight and that's okay. Like, it's just, I think you're
looking for more of a judgment-free zone.
Judgment-free
zone
and openness
in a relationship.
and willingness to be vulnerable and to share and to communicate. And you're clearly crushing it. So way to go in the communications department.
It's been years in progress for sure.
I bet.
But I think like the very key to this is feeling safe within yourself, of feeling like, okay, I'm going to tell them this thing and it feels scary because I know how that feels. Even in a safe relationship, sometimes it can feel scary where you're seen and heard and valued. But if you know that it's your truth, you have to act on it because your body literally will scream at you for years and it will not help your relationship to just bury it.
Yeah.
Because they will always feel a disconnect because if you aren't being true to you and communicating what's true to you in your heart, then you're never going to be able to connect to your partner fully.
Yeah.
If you don't feel safe within you, you're not going to feel safe completely with somebody else. That being said, there are things that I know I still probably need to talk to Matt about and to Steve about but it's like not the exact timing. Like
Mm.
I'm clear on it in my head. I know this thing in my head. I'm aware. And also I know it's not the right time yet
Yeah.
to say the thing.
Mm.
And that's okay to hold it because I want to know I'm really safe and clear in myself. I always think of Brene Brown, clear is kind, unclear is unkind.
Yes.
And if you are clear with yourself, first of all, you are being kind. And then you are showing an extra level of kindness when you are clear with your partner and when you're clear with yourself. And you can't control how your partner is going to react.
Yeah.
You can say it in the most gentle, kind way. You never know how it's going to be received. That's not your responsibility. But you can know that this was your truth.
Yeah.
And it can't be something that you're like, I mean, we talk about boundaries and all of that. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's about you and making that clear, like you were saying in that communication process. Like these are the things I am feeling. It's not necessarily because of what you've done or your intention behind those things. It's just because of my perceived experiences and my, past. And I just need you to know. I want to let you know because I want you to be aware because I want to have a good relationship with you. I want to feel connected to you. And so this is how this makes me feel. Express to me your intentions behind it. Like, let's talk about it so that I'm not spiraling out of control or whatever it is. But there is a time, there's literally a time within your cycle of when it's best to have these conversations. And I try not to do them, right before your period when you are spiraling and pissed and in the depths of anger and resentment of like, when those things come out strongly. I'm like, this is not the time to have this conversation or make snide comments. In a week after I'm done with my period,
let's talk.
That's the time to have this conversation and to think about it. But obviously this is something that's bugging me and maybe I just let it slide under the rug the rest of the month. This is my reminder that it actually is a conversation I need to have. This is the clear this is a conversation I need to have, not in this moment, but in a week and a half when I'm a little more level. But my body's telling me things. Like, it's not that you're crazy. You're not crazy. You're not too emotional. It's not just your hormones. It is your hormones. They're telling you what you need to say.
That's okay.
They're magnifying what you feel. The hormones are like a giant red beacon being like, hey, this is still bugging us. And to your point, don't deal with it now because you're a little bit, south of crazy. But
just take a look. It's like, don't ignore
attention.
This. Yeah.
Write it out if you need to. Like, go put it down somewhere so that you're clear. Get clear on it. Why is this bugging me so much? What is it behind this that makes me feel like all of these things that I'm feeling? What am I even feeling? Like, get clear on those things so that when you have the conversation, you can have it in a more logical, level manner, and it's better received that way.
We cannot go any further without asking about the church.
Oh, yes.
I gotta know because you're very candid and open with your beliefs, which is lovely and beautiful.
Yeah.
You're also living from an outside perspective, so take this with a grain of salt, kind of the antithesis of what the church believes in, right? So you have a gay ex-husband, the fact that you have an ex-husband, divorced, super stigmatized, you're now remarried, you've got a blended family, like you're kind of, you're doing it all and it's amazing, but I don't have a church background. How do you sort of manage all of that, right? That sort of, very fundamentalist kind of upbringing to then your now lived experience with these men in your life.
Yeah. I think to me, the Mormon church, I am so curious. I am so curious about it because like you said, it seems like the antithesis to what the church teaches. But you sort of seem to be able to balance both.
You're doing it all.
Yeah.
I'm doing it in a way that works for me.
Yeah.
Okay, I love
that. And
that
fits into what I ultimately believe at this point and what feels in alignment for me. There is a lot within the church itself that I really do not align with, that does not feel good to me, that I did at one point align with. And again, it's been like these little moments of releasing like, this just doesn't work for me. That being said, I like going to church with my husband on Sunday. I like believing in a higher power.
Yeah.
I love the old ladies that are in my church congregation that are like, every Sunday, they're like, oh, we just can't wait to see what you're wearing to church today. And, if I have hair or not, and like all of these things, like, there's love there
Yeah.
for some beliefs that aren't necessarily associated with my church. And it wasn't until like probably a month ago that I could really say this. Like,
Mm.
because of me figuring it out and sorting through
Right.
it, I wasn't ready to say it out loud. But I've been honest about the fact that I don't know where I am and what it is. But it's like I was raising my daughter in the church, and now I'm like, I don't know that this is
Mm.
the best place for you to be. And it's been that like that for years. Like she
Right.
hasn't been to church. I mean, she comes occasionally, but um I don't know that I want her
Mm.
raised in the Mormon church. I don't I mean, like, the Mormon church very much believes that there's one way to God and there's one way to happiness and all of that, and I'm like, "That's not my lived experience, and I
Yeah.
don't believe that." I know too many people in my life that are happy in so many other
And
ways, and
good and
such
loving and
good, kind
kind.
people
Yeah.
Right.
that how are they not going to
Right.
whatever is in this afterlife? Like, I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, it's just been this breaking down of that idea that there's one way
Yeah.
to live and there's one right path
So one
and this
size
is the
fits all.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You
this
have
is
to
the way
accept
God speaks to you.
everything. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you've sort of
And
cherry picked the bits that you like,
With
and
a lot
which
of
I love
people
that. No,
do,
it's
I
great.
think,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
in religion, right? And they focus on
Mhm.
the bits and pieces that speak to them, that they believe in, the cultural parts of it, the traditions that matter to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to buy into everything.
Yeah.
You sort of pick
Yeah.
what's right for you,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's sort of
Yeah.
more of a modern approach to bringing religion into your life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious
Yeah.
though, did you get any pushback? Because you live more of a non-traditional Mormon life, I guess you
Mhm.
could say. Did you get any pushback from the church or from your fellow church members?
I haven't. Um, there's definitely, like, I know feelings amongst, like, family members, and I'm not talking, like, necessarily my immediate
Mm.
family. Maybe some there, I don't know. I just don't really care.
Yeah.
There you
But
go.
also probably more extended family and, like, Steve's family definitely,
Mm.
I know, has opinions about how Steve lives, and
Right.
also about me. That being said, I also know they really genuinely love me and support me,
Mm.
and most of them genuinely love and support Steve, but
Yeah.
they're still not all there. Outside of that, I think I've always kind of been a little bit outside of the church norms
Mm.
and never I remember, like, growing up and just not fitting in with the Mormon kids at school, and I never dressed the way they did
Yeah.
or looked the way they did. I was still very much like, I was a super straight edge kid and still pretty much am in lots of ways.
Mm.
And so it's like this weird thing, but I never looked the part, and I remember thinking, "Am I being rebellious? Am
Mhm.
I trying
Right.
to, like, make a point here or
Mhm.
something?" And I always came back again to connecting to myself and being like, "No, this is just who I am."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I like doing weird stuff with my hair. I like expressing
Mhm.
myself through my clothing and things like that, and it was okay. Like,
Yeah.
nothing was wrong with
You're not
what I
harming
did.
anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was never like out of, like, the big stuff, I was never doing drugs, I was never
Yeah.
drinking, I was never having sex, like, it's supposedly right and wrong things within the church, that I grew up thinking those were right and wrong. I never was doing those things, I was like, "I'm
Right.
fine." So
Yeah.
but I was expressing myself, and
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
that felt like a rebellion, and so I had to work through some of these things as a teenager of, "Okay, but I don't look the part," and even, like, Steve, after we got married, he'd be like, "Maybe you should wear these dresses, that look
Mm.
more like Mormon girls," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"But is that really who you know me to be? Is that
Yeah.
really who you want me to be?" And he'd be like, "I guess not."
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, you married me because I am who I am." And and him coming to these realizations that it doesn't have to look a certain way, and I truly believe that's why Steve and I came into each other's lives,
Mm.
Mhm.
is Steve Steve supported me in being who I was, but it also was very much a process for him to work through seeing something that didn't look like the Mormon
Yeah.
norm.
Right.
Yeah.
And he needed to know that that was okay so that eventually he could be okay with who he is.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I know it sounds like I'm putting words in Steve's mouth. Steve and I talk so much about all this stuff
Mm.
that it's like he would say yes. Like
Yeah.
it's just
You kind of paved the way for him in a sense, right?
Yeah.
By your own
To
quote,
embrace who he
right?
is.
To embrace who he is,
To
And
show
you're
him that different isn't bad.
Right.
It's maybe just liberating.
And he supported
Yes.
you through that, and then you supported him. And I think that's just
oh my God,
so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It really is to be able to support each other in that way.
Going back to the conversations about communication,
Yeah.
this is why it's powerful to do and say what feels right for you. Is because even in mine and Matt's marriage, like this is the key of like, I'm okay to be my person and to be who I am. And you're okay to be yours. And I want to know that person. And I want to love that person. And then that trickles down to like your kids and your family and the people in your life, because you've brought in this view of what it should look like or what it needs to look like. And it creates the most amazing relationships and connections to people in the most amazing ways. So there's my
so
little
wonderful.
So beautiful.
No,
And
I love this.
I want to talk about your work with others. I mean, you have the Betrayed Badass Society.
Yeah,
and I
tell
saw
us
that you have
about
the special
that.
Bulldology. I think it's called the Bulldology Journal. So tell us about your work with supporting other people.
So I started supporting other people when Steve and I were still married, with support groups and facilitating support groups. At that time, they were within our church and all of that, and realized like, man, this is something I love doing and that I'm good at.
Yeah.
Like I'd worked through this process on my own and hadn't really realized it until I started going to those. I'm like, man, I have something here. And so I knew down the line that this was something I wanted to do, and that Steve and I would share our story. Like both of those things were really deep on my heart, because I don't want women or anybody to sit in the shit after having gone through betrayal or having a partner come out. Like your life still gets to be amazing and beautiful and wonderful on the other side. So I've created tools for that. I've got like some free workbooks. I have the Bulldology Journal, which is like super basic, but I love it. It helps you understand setting boundaries in like the most basic way and walks you through that process on a daily basis. So it's a really cool resource. I hardly ever talk about it. I'm like, why am I not pushing this thing? Like I go back and look at it, I'm like, this is good.
Oh, God.
It really does help you get to know yourself and connect back to yourself, so you know what you need and how you can take back the power in your life. Again, because we can't control anybody else. We can control us. The Betrayed Badass Society is new. I've done coaching programs, group coaching, that's like smaller groups of like 4 to 5 women. I do one-on-one coaching. I host retreats. The Betrayed Badass Society was like, I want women to come home to their badassery after betrayal. And I want them to take the stigma out of being betrayed. Like, how many of us have been betrayed? Most of us in some way, shape, or form. And if not by somebody else, we've been in self-betrayal.
Yeah.
And so I want to take that stigma out of that. We created the Betrayed Badass Society. And it's at like a price point that ideally most anybody can afford, so that you can get in and get support and feel seen and not alone as you navigate this process, because you're not. Even though it feels like you are so alone, you are not. And so I'm really excited about that coming together and being able to have that offer out there.
And where can people find more information about that?
Yeah, so you can go to theboldlogic.com/BBS, so Badass Society, or Betrayed Badass Society, to get information there. You can also find me. I'm very active on Instagram at Hey Jessica Frew. And then if you're like, man, I need to know more of this story, you can go to our podcast. Start with episode 1. It's called Husband Law. It's on any podcasting platform. And you can hear my ex-husband, my husband, and myself talk about all of the things and share our stories from when Steve and I met, and when Matt and his ex-wife met up on through till today.
And it's so good. So definitely go check it out.
Definitely check it out. And we'll put the links in our show notes for all of that, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica,
Thank
for being here and
what
for
a pleasure.
sharing. Honestly, it takes a lot of courage to share your story in any shape or form. So thank you, because it really does help educate and destigmatize and normalize and all of the things that we are trying to do. So major, major, big time thanks from all of us at Dirty Laundry. And we will hopefully see you again.
Yes.
I feel like you got lots more stories to share.
I've got so many stories.
We just scratched the surface here. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
This episode was written and created by Alex Howard and Amanda Silver, produced, edited, and engineered by RTF Productions. Make sure to rate and review our show if you loved it, and give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast to stay up to date on all upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and go easy on us. We're not your ex.